It's a lot of nonsense.
Idiots saying nonsense.
Enough of this nonsense. Nonsense! Nonsense!
Layers and layers of nonsense.
What is this nonsense?
Nonsense is everywhere, surrounding us like an invisible cloud.
Nonsense in a brand new light.
That is what is nonsense.
Every day they write articles on nonsense.
A little nonsense now, relished by the wisest.
Nonsense.
Hello and welcome to Nonsense, the podcast where no topic is off topic and where we attempt to make sense of the nonsensical world in which we currently find ourselves living. Today I am joined by Michael Green. He is an amazing artist who explores the human condition through technology and art. His work ranges from video to 3D to AI-created artwork. Welcome to the show, and thanks for joining me today.
Well, thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Well, first off, I'd just like to ask, how's it going? How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing great. Actually, this has been a great year for me personally.
That's good.
Under like these strenuous circumstances, a little challenging just to be isolated all the time and not being able to see people. But surprisingly, I've actually been more social through this period from Zoom. So
Nice.
it's just a strange way to. That's a challenge just to be locked in the bunker. We had like a wildfire a couple weeks too, so that was like
Oh yeah,
phase
that's right.
2 of quarantine. It was about like 30 minutes away from our house, and
Oh wow.
it's like orange sky and like a morphing, like the sun was morphing colors like through time, like through like a 10-minute period it would be like red, orange, and the unhealthiest air pollution in the world. Like our city was ranked like the worst in the world, and so that was just another week of just hunkering down and just being very aware that the matrix is we're in a process of an unraveling, I suppose.
Yeah.
But doing good.
That's great.
Other than that,
Well,
yeah,
it's good to hear.
try to stay positive and
Yeah.
create and can. So
If you don't mind, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and about your art? And yeah, who's Michael
Sure.
Green?
Who is Michael Green? I don't know. There's so many layers. I mean, I'm playing a role right now to a degree. But no, I don't know. I don't like the word artist. I think it's embarrassing. I like creator. Like I just like to make things, because I don't know, like going forward, I don't know if I even want to do art. I just want to do something creative or build things. But yeah, I've done all kinds of. I've been doing art now for 7 years, and yeah, I feel like I'm at the stage now where I could retire at any moment, because like I feel like that mission was accomplished. I feel like I've explored every single category that I wanted to, for the exception of I like the idea of artists exploring religious ideas. Like I like historical religious paintings. I feel like that might be the last phase of this operation, to like make like Christian art or something. And I know like that it's just so hard. I feel like I'm in it. Okay, well, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question exactly, but I just have a lot of problems these days with being an artist on the internet. One, I feel like I'm trapped in this echo chamber of like an art community that I no longer resonate with. It was an art community that I built, that I tried to like get involved with like 5 years ago, and those scenes are kind of like died off, and it's just gotten too like political for me. And like every time I express myself online, I lose followers. I don't even know if anybody likes me because I feel if people do like my work, but if I feel like a true follower would support me everywhere I go. I just feel totally disconnected from that, and I feel like that type of art that I would want to make, like a Christian art, or just like a spiritual, like a communication with God. I'm not sure if it would, who that would resonate with, and I feel like this is a good opportunity on this podcast to maybe like connect with people who are on the same frequency. That's what I'm personally looking for, just to build something like where people just kind of understand my thoughts and ideas. So to answer your question, it's a bit complicated. Yeah, I don't know. It's just weird. One day you wake up and there's just like 7 years of work behind you. I don't, it's just strange that I don't even, it's just like you're in a trance or something and there's downloads and it's just here. Like, I just feel like I'm here to download the information from my intuition, wherever that comes from. That's kind of how I approach each one. And what keeps me going is I'm not, like, my skills are, I lack some certain skills. So from a technical standpoint, I'll look at some of the work and it's just filled with mistakes. Like, I'm just not as skillful as the other people. So that's what inspires me to go forward, is just to improve my skills. Like, I imagine it would be boring if I mastered those skills after 7 years. And it just, so I don't know. It's a process of just trying to get better. And that's, other than that, like the actual process of creation is why I do it. But other than that, all the other stuff is, I'm really burned out. Like the process of like making something and then how to share it on the internet, especially with like these algorithms that make it more difficult to share the work with. I find that just a huge problem in 2020 compared to like 2015, where there is a lot of opportunities to share the work. Those online art groups were flourishing, and also it was just I think the 2010s was a great decade for art in general. Like, I think a lot of magical things happened, and I'm starting to lose interest in art going forward because it kind of feels like it's the same thing over and over again. And I have like a vision for what I would want to see in the future. I just see this as a huge enlightenment period, but I don't see many other artists who see things that way, which that's fine. That's why you make art, right? It's just, if that's how I feel, then maybe that's what I need to do going forward. But I just have a different idea of where I would like to see it, and I don't, it's just become a little bit boring to me. I'm like, kind of like, is this a waste of time? I don't, it might be, I don't know. So these are the questions I'm facing today.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll figure it out soon, but.
Well, I know in the art world, people tend to get into these like characterizations of themselves, and then they become that and they embody that, and they're not allowed to evolve. And I think it's great that you're able to kind of push yourself through that and continue to evolve and explore new mediums. But I'd like to kind of touch back on what you were saying about the algorithms. I know you had a project back, I forget what year, that got censored pretty heavily.
The Neo Matrix, is that that political conspiracy? It was like it was a conspiracy theory mockumentary.
Okay.
Should I go into that a little bit?
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that. Yeah.
For background for people listening, it was designed. I kind of saw it as video art, Like it was meant to like mimic the conspiracy theory videos online where there's like bad editing and like bad, like really awful stock music. But I really enjoy that aesthetic and that world. And so I built one, and there is a bit of a trolling nature to it. As I told you, I'm in that echo chamber of an art community that's um, definitely leaning towards like left, and I want to just state that I'm removed from that paradigm. I'm just like an alien observing all this like from above. Um, but I was aware that the audience was on the left, and I made the documentary to troll them. So like there's like this subtle like narrative of Trump being like Neo from the Matrix, like some sort of like hero. But if you actually do follow the conspiracy theories from that time, like they happen to lean more towards the conservatives, and that's what they're saying, like Alex Jones and stuff. But I didn't necessarily believe all of like that wasn't my personal political statement, and some things were even put in there that I knew were like completely flat out false to me. Like I was literally being like a manipulator of information. But anyway, so there was like a version posted on Vimeo, and then I posted another version on YouTube with the intent of it getting pulled, because I wanted to show to the left audience specifically, like there's a whole world over here where people are getting censored in conspiracy theories culture. I'm not sure if they were aware of that. So I made the design for the I edited the YouTube version. It's a little bit different. I forget it got removed, so I don't remember the edit I made, but it's a subtly different than the Vimeo one. And I put all these like hashtags that I know would get detected. It looked like it was like a hardcore Trump supporter, you know, had the MAGA and like the QAnon, and or I don't even know if QAnon was around there, but whatever, those types of hashtags. And through time, it got attacked instantly by YouTube. I have it documented on my website, officialmichaelgreen.com, just for reference. But you can go there, and I think there was like, they slowly went after it, going for copyright strikes. It got banned in a couple countries, and then like a year later, they removed it because of hate speech, which there's absolutely no hate speech in there at all. Not even anything questionable. I mean, you can watch and be the judge yourself. But it achieved the objective, which I set out was I wanted it to get banned on YouTube, to show everybody like this is going on. And since then, the censorship has gotten a lot worse. I tried to for a year, I thought like maybe I'll be a conspiracy theorist, which was a bad idea. I made like a YouTube channel and explored all these fringe topics. And it was more of I consider it a failure, because I don't think I'm very good with the camera and explaining these things, or at least in that format, vlog format. But like I realized I did that for about a year, and then I just deleted all the videos, because I'm thinking like I need to survive here on the internet. Like, oh, I think you're frozen. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Okay, cool.
I need to survive on the internet long term, and if I keep this up, I've seen what happens to other people. You just slowly get banned. And so I just made it a rule to not really talk about serious things on the internet anymore. And I did discover a little portal for anybody watching. If they want to share a message, Instagram Stories is free. It's the only place I found out of all these social media networks where I can get like 70 to 100 people to read a meme. And if I post that same message in Instagram, it would get suppressed. Facebook is just pathetic, 0 to 2 likes. and Twitter's a joke too. So I think that's a major issue going forward: censorship and the manipulation of the algorithms, making it harder for communities to get together and harder to communicate ideas in this crazy time where as a collective we need to work together and figure something out, like what the hell is going on. Let's talk about it. So we're heading towards a technocracy. I don't
Seems
know
to
if
be that
that'll
way.
get censored, but seems that way, right?
Yeah. And it's funny today because it feels like anything that gets censored, it's almost like becoming censored is like a badge of honor almost, or like that's the real information that I want to see. It's like, oh, well, why was it censored? It like creates this like layer of curiosity, this layer of like, which I think is really funny, which is like an unintentional, I think, consequence of it. It's like that it becomes the kind of unknown secret thing that you're kind of like, oh wow. And then it's like, why did it get censored? And from my perspective, it's like a lot of these companies and for sure the mainstream media are owned by very specific groups of people. And if you have a narrative that goes against theirs, it's immediately taken offline. And for me, that the censorship adds almost an element of validity to it. I think it's really fascinating in that regard.
It's gone even beyond that, where like I had a friend last week who told me he posted something on Instagram that just said individual thought, right? And it wasn't even like a political statement. It was just like some like funny art, and it just had individual thought, and he suspected that was tagged just because it was free, involved what is the term, or free thinking, or well, free thought, or just thinking in itself is
He's thought for himself.
Under attack. Now, I don't know if that's the best example. I mean, we don't know for certain if he was censored, but out of all of his posts ever, that one was just seemed to be shadow banned or pushed behind. It was just unusual low amount of likes. And I find that this is the wildest time to be alive. I just can't believe that thinking is dangerous. Just thinking, like having conversations with people about serious issues, is so dangerous. And I mean, that's just the way things are. But it's pretty, for me, it's pretty isolating, because like I don't even bother talking about certain issues because I know it's gonna like upset people. Just simple conversations that we need to be having. I won't. I'm trying not to get into COVID.
We'll save that. We'll save that for a little bit later.
I don't care. We'll do it. Sure. I think it's important to talk about that. But anyway, yeah. I'll hold off.
Well, it's become, everything's become so polarizing, and it's interesting in a sense, because it's like, it's part of, in my mind, it's part of what I would consider a narrative of divide and conquer.
Mm-hmm.
You keep everyone bickering about nonsense, and nothing can get done. They can't, and it's also become an era.
Looks like, okay, we had a little freeze. We're good.
Okay.
I didn't know if the gremlins came Sorry for interrupting you.
No, you're fine. It's just so fascinating. Like we're at this like kind of crux, like this point in history where it's like we've been given access to the information through the internet, and then as a result of that, people have started to explore and go down these rabbit holes of conspiracies and layers of all sorts of different things. And it's almost like they opened Pandora's box and now they're like desperately trying to grab everything and put it back in. And it's like, no, it's too late now, guys. Like you kind of screwed the pooch on this one.
And well, fine, I'll talk about COVID. But I don't need to go deep in it. I think personally that COVID, one layer of it might be a measure to break down that energy of the awakening, if there is an awakening, or just a aware, like a raised consciousness. It seemed like before this, people were really getting away with like breaking the matrix apart, and now we're kind of like in this new world where it kind of slowed that progress down, and it affects everybody. So previously, when you had like an idea about a conspiracy theory, it's like, okay, you disagree, whatever. But now this affects the people you interact with, depending on how they view COVID. We have to all kind of work together through this. So, in my opinion, I think there might be something to that, like that it was to just stop that momentum. I don't know. Does that make sense? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, they came to the realization that that things were moving too quickly against them. And when I say they, there's always this floating around out here, but it's really, yeah, I mean, people in power. It's like you don't want people to be aware of how powerful they really are. Because when they step into that awareness fully, then they lose the need for that kind of leadership, or that pretend leadership that we've put up on these pedestals through politics and through the religion and these cultural narratives that kind of drive a lot of the divisive nature of things. And yeah, they're definitely kind of, I think, desperate. It's like, I feel like it's like a last ditch effort. Like it's like, oh shit, we gotta clamp down. Things are getting too crazy. It's like they're aware of the pedophiles. They're aware of the adrenochrome, whatever it may be. And it's really fascinating to see. It's fascinating to be a part of. I think, like you were saying earlier, it's like to be alive during this time is just really fantastic. It's amazing to watch. It's scary in a lot of ways too, though, because it's like we're seeing kind of the. I'm even seeing people that I thought were really fringe and really like kind of out there thinkers, and even they are getting pulled into these narratives. And it's kind of like, in a sense, it's also kind of weeding people out. It's like, who are the real like free thinkers out there? Who are the real people that are actually striving to understand what's going on in a way that's not built around manufactured narratives? And I think that it's really interesting. And from what I've seen is that they've done a good job. I think it helps that they have a kind of global reach. It's like if it was just America in a lockdown, but because they were able to do kind of it everywhere, it kind of created that global narrative. And when it becomes global, then it's like, okay, well, it's harder to think that a conspiracy could be global. And I find that to be really fascinating. And it's kind of like flipped some switch in people's minds, where they've kind of just shut down a lot of those kind of more out there theories and thoughts. But at the same time, I will say I am seeing a decent amount of like growth into people stepping into a certain awareness. And even if it has other layers of oppression within that awareness, I still do have hope for humanity on some level.
I do too. Actually, there's like several things I want to say at the same time. Okay. First thing I want to say, maybe this might be important of how to cope with this time. Like whatever you think of what this thing is, this COVID is. The reality is we have to stay inward. Maybe we don't have jobs, maybe, and maybe we have a lot of time on our hands. And I think this is the ideal opportunity to personally heal and grow. And that's what I was saying in the beginning of this talk, that this is like one of the best years for me, because it got me out of a job, like a 9-to-5 job that I had for 15 years to pay the bills, but was like literally destroying me. And I just didn't have the courage to quit, and I was forced to quit. And that was wild, because like I believe in in messages or seeing synchronicities that guide me. And the day I quit that job was the 1-year anniversary of my mother's passing, and I knew it was because literally like that week the lockdown happened, and I'm like, this is a sign. Like my mom would want me to not do this anymore and heal. And for me, there's just been a lot of tremendous growth under a very hard time. I tried to just stay busy creatively, and now I'm trying to learn new skills. I'm trying to learn coding, and I think that's I see it around me too, with like families. Sometimes like families are just too busy to be around each other, so all the work, and then now they have like time to be with each other. I just see people on my neighborhood that are happy, like happy families, like walking around. And so it's a good opportunity to just take a little time out if you can, and make something positive. And I do understand there's a lot of people who are on the opposite side of that spectrum, who are in hell too, and who can't pay bills,
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just it's a period, if you are lucky, to pray for gratitude or appreciate just day-to-day life. Like even after like this wildfire, I was just so appreciative after a week of staying inside. Like I'm like, well, fuck, like other people lost their lives, their homes. I'm grateful I survived it. Okay, I had to stay inside, and like now I appreciate just being outside. Just want to like get on the ground and like hug the earth. I mean, it's just that kind of like joy, like of a simple thing that I never even cared about before. And I think that's an awareness, like that's growing consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that sounds too like cosmic for people, but I really do believe it is an opportunity to take a time out, ask like, what are you doing? Get rid of things that aren't working for you,
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, I have no idea what to do even today or tomorrow, like going forward. There's no plans anymore.
Yeah, I feel like it's just like kind of watch and wait, especially leading up to the election, and kind of seeing what kind of chaos will ensue in the coming months. Maybe we'll see some alien invasions or something, or something like that.
I was curious what you thought about aliens, because that's one topic that not like, for me personally, my process is just look at a bunch of information through X amount of time, years, and then like dots begin to connect. And with aliens, I just never spent a lot of time exploring it, and I just feel there's so much like disinformation. My personal view is I think there's something like interdimensionally, and that's just based on my readings of the DMT experience, just those machine elves. There's like proof that there's some sort of entity that you're communicating with. And I also had like a personal experience with an overdose of what are those edibles, where I felt like I was talking to some dark entity, and it was like overlayered in this reality. But anyway, I think that there might be something interdimensional, aliens or demons. But and I have 2 UFO encounters too. I'll get to the question. I'm just leading up to it. One was December 21st, 2012, the day of the Mayan
Oh wow.
end of the world.
Yeah.
There's like 5 orange orbs. Like I was sober. I was walking home with a friend. He was high, but he's like the most rational skeptic. And we had enough time to look at each other and like, what is that? And I don't know. And it went on for 30 seconds, and these orbs like morphed into each other, and then they like flew towards my house, the direction of my house. I'm like, oh my God, this is it. They're coming to my house. And I felt like a UFO report. And then exactly 5 years later, I saw the same thing.
Oh wow.
Approximately the same time. All right, leading up to my question, what I'm curious. Like, I don't think we've ever talked about this personally, but I'm just curious what your thoughts are on like UFOs and aliens.
I mean, I'm kind of in the same boat as you, similar boat. I see the terms like aliens or angels or demons or these types of things. They're kind of just these words that we give kind of these unknown characters that kind of play a role within our matrix, so to speak. Yeah, and for me, it is definitely more related to a multidimensionality of things, and with beings existing in different parallel worlds and universes and layers of the experience that I don't know exactly why they would want to engage with our reality or why they're here per se, and maybe it is. I've always liked the biblical narrative of the fall. I've always found that really fascinating, and kind of had these thoughts about like when there was this fall, right? With humanity fell these demons or the devil. He was kicked out of heaven, and his angels, the fallen angels, were kicked out with him. And I've always had this thought of like this narrative that I know that if I was the devil and I got kicked out of heaven, and these humans got kicked out of heaven, and I had a little bit more power than them, and I was trying to argue with God and be like, I'm like as good as you, that I would create a kind of layer of narratives to keep the humans unaware of their connection to that divine. So I kind of see aliens as these beings that they only can stay in power, and it kind of goes back into that kind of divide and conquer mentality, but they can only stay in power as long as we are unaware of our own power. Because as soon as we are aware of our power, and as soon as we connect into kind of our divine right, I believe, as human beings, and step into the awareness that death is more an illusion than we've been kind of sold, that they kind of lose their ability to play God, so to speak. So that's kind of how I see them, as these beings that kind of desire to be gods, and as a result, they've created these layers of religious, cultural, and political narratives to kind of that we have to then weed through to really kind of understand what's really going on. And this links into all different religions, all different kind of historical contexts, going back to the Roman Empire and going into the Knights Templar and all these different types of things. And it's really fascinating. And even like I have a friend of mine who he goes down to Mexico. I don't know if I've sent you that stuff, the Atzlan or whatever. Do you remember those rocks that were carved?
I don't recall.
Okay.
I mean, I might be in one of the big packets. Like,
well, he goes down. He goes down to Mexico, and he met this guy who has been finding these artifacts for a large number of years. I think dating back into the 70s, and they're really phenomenal. I think they've had a few specials on like the History Channel and a few things like that, where they've kind of appeared into the consciousness. But I've always thought those were really fascinating, and it's always this like visualization of like the big ovally head with like the big eyes, and I think it's really fascinating. And I wonder if it's like, okay, is that just how multidimensional beings manifest in this reality? Is that just how they are perceived by like our human brains to be able to like understand things? And I am fascinated by the layers of stories regarding the Palladians and all these different kind of races. It's like yeah, there's different races of human beings. It only makes sense that there would be different races of different layers of dimensional beings. Like, of course, like, kind of makes sense. And I am kind of curious. Like, I know that a lot of the kind of like 5D Earth community kind of breaking into that, and they talk a lot. There's a lot of channelers and people that talk a lot about kind of these beings kind of coming to help uplift humanity. I think that's kind of a cool narrative that we're able to tell ourselves. And who knows how true it is? Like, it's hard. It's really hard to say. I just think it's fascinating personally. I mean, I think it's cool to think about, and I think it's cool. It would be cool if there was some race that was here and it's like, hey guys, like, it's time to come into the new world, the new Galactic Federation, or whatever it may be. And that maybe the aliens that got kicked out of outer space or something came here, and now those aliens who came here to control us, like, they lost their powers, and they're trying to like get their powers back, and like, they're running around with their heads cut off and like just trying to figure things out. But yeah, I don't know if that fully answers your question, but it's I find it all to be fascinating, and I just think that it is a kind of, it's just a different word for an unknown character. You know, is it an alien? Is it an angel? Is it a demon? Is it a multidimensional orb of energy? Like, who knows?
I'm just curious of why, like in the last, I don't know, maybe even since like the Tom DeLonge, like the Blink 182 era, seems like there's like some sort of soft disclosure, which I'm skeptical of. Like, it's just such a bizarre year that on the news, the government says, yeah, we have craft. I believe they said we have bodies too.
Yeah.
And nobody even cares. Like, I mean, if this was like 10 years ago, or if nothing was like happening, that would be a big story. But it's just, I don't understand. Like, I don't understand reality. Actually, it's just like when I'm just thinking of 2020, I'm just trying to think of the bigger picture as far as I can go. Is this part? Do you think there's a spiritual battle of in the universe going on right now? God, or like a good entity versus evil entity?
Yeah.
Do you see a connection there at all?
Yeah, definitely. I think that I think there always has been, and I think it always continues to play itself out in cycles. And I think that we are at the end of a cycle. So in being at the end of a cycle, I feel like a lot will come to light. And it's like, it's 2020, you know, in hindsight, vision's 2020, you know, you can start to see things and they start to unravel. And I think that that's coming into being.
Like, do you think it'll go all the way? Like the end, like all will be revealed through time. Like, do you think we'll get to the point of the unraveling where aliens might make their presence, or they might come out of the bunkers,
come out of the deep underground military bases?
Yeah, like just where all is, like, in order to make the transition to the next cycle, all of this is unraveled. And I don't know.
I have mixed feelings about it, because I do know that there's Project Bluebeam, and that's a narrative that could potentially be played out, which for those of you who don't know is kind of I believe it was back in the 70s, they wrote a way to kind of usher in a new world order and usher in a global governance system would be to fake an alien invasion, and then introduce a messiah around the world that would kind of usher in a new world religion and a new world order and a new world governance system. So I'm skeptical because that narrative exists. It's like, okay, as we start to see aliens, like, are these really the aliens that are here to help? Are these really the aliens that are fighting the battle? Or are these like another layer of manipulation, another layer of fear? So I'm on the fence about it, but I will say there is definitely a spiritual battle going on, and I think that, like you were saying earlier, like, we're kind of in this time where we have time now. We have time to do the work. We have time to sit and meditate and really kind of come to terms with our own traumas, our own psyches, really break into our what I like to call the id entities, our identities, but our id entities. And I think that's really important. And I think for the people who are doing the work and who are taking the time and who are not getting swept up in the narratives, that it's important for us to kind of all come together and have these types of conversations so that we are able to fully step into the world that we want to create collectively. And I do think that things like the COVID and these things, Black Lives Matter and all of it, it's a big distraction to keep you distracted from yourself, to keep you distracted and in all these layers of fear and paranoia, and through that you're not gonna, like, even if you have free time, you're still gonna be so mentally clouded by all of these different layers that you're not gonna really even be able to tap into the deepest levels of yourself. And I think it's all very, very intentional. And it's like, I've also always thought, like, do the people in power really realize how evil they are? Like, or are they just kind of like playing out these like Matrix character roles? Like, are they just like high level NPCs who are just pulling, like, just, oh, I'm Trump, I'm just gonna play out this role of like, I break down the system, like.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know of anything. I mean, I can only, I mean, through these whole conversations, this is only, I'm just guessing or just telling you an honest answer, which changes through time.
Yeah.
Actually, I recently discovered that the term black pill, which it's been around, I just wasn't aware of it. But I really feel like through my own personal journey of just trying to understand things, I was, what you were talking about, like distracted. I'm just bombarded with so much information where it's just so hard to determine what is legit or not, that I ended up trusting, I didn't trust knowledge at all, or information at all. And it broke down my view of history, with exploring Tartaria, which was like fascinating. But I think there's a danger to that theory too, like that and flat Earth, because those two, which very well may be psyops, to make you not believe in anything. Because if you really, okay, I just want to make a disclaimer. I know people get very upset about flat Earth, but I want to explain it just because it's there for a purpose right now. It has its own agenda. It's a divide and conquer agenda, in my opinion. I just see people trying to figure out what's going on, and then there's this flat Earth fights in the comments. But I did explore it back when I had my YouTube channel. Just in a week, I just absorbed all the information, and it really broke down my sense of reality. And I came to the conclusion that, okay, I'm not convinced of flat Earth, but I'm not convinced of what this realm is. I mean, it really went that far. I've gotten through, and that's kind of a dangerous idea. Like, my intuition says, well, it's most likely round because the other planets are round. But Every time I tried to prove that it was round, I couldn't. And that was problematic, and I ended up being blackpilled, along with like exploring the newer Tartaria theory, um, which I don't know if we should explain to the viewers
Sure, you can, yeah,
uh,
explain a little bit, yeah.
of the background. The idea that, well, maybe would you do a better job at that? Like, I don't know how to really put that all together.
Um, so at least from my understanding, I'm not super deep into it at the moment. But from the little bit that I do know, it seems like there was a global empire that existed as recently as the 1800s, late 1800s, that was essentially erased from history. And what they're doing is they're kind of going back and they're looking at the architecture around the world, and making interesting correlations between different buildings and different places that were built, in ways that are really profound. Like it goes back to a lot of, I believe it's the Phoenician architecture styles and things like that, and that even maybe the Phoenicians themselves co-opted it from an older race. And then it's also kind of linked into the mud flood narratives as well, which, if you don't know what that is, it's kind of a theory that there were large floods that also helped in wiping out some of those histories, and destroying a lot of the buildings and a lot of the places that, the temples and the different holy places as well. I think it's really fascinating. It also gets into some free energy theories as well, with having to do with the architecture itself, having these domes made of copper, having these antennas that would be like crosses, or these things on top that would potentially have been used to spread free energy, or free Wi-Fi, or free, or even healing frequencies, or like, who really knows?
Healing organs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's looking at too, like at churches and church buildings and how they're built, and talking more about like older structures, obviously. And then it gets into like, we even today potentially don't have the ability to build some of these buildings with the technology that we have. So it's pretty interesting, like, how were these buildings there? How, and why is it that the bottom halves of the windows are covered? And like, there's all these really interesting links into it.
It's fascinating. It's so bizarre. The orphan trains. I mean, I just look at that and I'm like, it just makes me question, what is this? It's strange. I mean, the thing I'm skeptical about Tartaria is they're really defiant that in the early 1800s, the last cycle happened. And I don't know, for viewers interested in this, Max Egan, that's the guy who got me into it. He's a brilliant mind. He's censored off YouTube, but he has a lot of episodes on Tartaria, which he'll get you thinking. I mean, he goes way out there. He even had like a crazy theory about how these like sculptures were in the past, like by Michelangelo, were 3D printed. But I've always wondered about that, about why back in like, you look at ancient art and ancient architecture, I'm like, why are we so dumb these days? Like, why can't we don't even know how to make those sculptures? And were these people that brilliant? I mean, it is possible. I mean, Leonardo da Vinci is a real genius. I mean, and he invented flying machines. So maybe, but perhaps it's an interesting idea to explore, if maybe technology was used, because you can use technology today and that enhances like, you look at like music production, or even like use of AI, like you can do things that are beyond the human mind. So that was interesting. I watched Barry Lyndon yesterday, and I saw a bunch of those. You just see the buildings everywhere, and it just, how were they built? That's the question. It seems like there might be something there of some previous civilization, but what happened to me, that I lost my sense of history through that, because I just, well, all history's a lie. Like the Roman Empire never happened. I mean, that's the thing now. It is possible that you can eliminate history and just rewrite it.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't have to be that long ago. You can see what happens in a generation of how history is being changed right now. So you can do it. So it just kind of like fucked with my head. And so now I'm at the point in this process of knowledge where I'm just kind of like trying to back away from all this information. I mean, it's fun to talk about. I love it's the most interesting thing to explore and think about, but I don't like what it does to me sometimes
Mm-hmm.
when I my exploration for knowledge. It was good to break down reality, but I want to rebuild it, and rationally. Like I don't want to sound like a crazy person. And as I said, like all these things we discuss, even aliens, like we go into weird little areas and everything. Like I love exploring those ideas.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't believe anything, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't. I mean, I have a basic grasping of what's happening now. Have
Yeah.
theories too,
Mm-hmm.
but that's all. I'm not faithful to any of these ideas we're discussing. I mean, that's the whole process of searching
Yeah.
for knowledge is it changes through time.
Yeah. And it's, I don't know. I even going back to the statues. I even heard this theory that they were actually real people that got turned to stone.
Yeah. that petrification, is that what that is, or what's a term for that? Like when a being turns into stone.
That sounds right. I don't know what the actual term would be, but that sounds correct.
Yeah, that's
Petrified.
interesting too. I've seen some bizarre photos of these mountain structures that look like
Yeah.
giants.
Yeah.
I want to say, like, just turning it back to just my art practice, is that a lot of these ideas we're discussing, I'm putting into like my current work. I even have like the cataclysm of the mud flood in this AI opera I'm currently working on. There's like a scene with like a Tesla machine, or the Tesla machine like keeled over and like plasma shooting, and like a broken organ. It's like a free energy device, and mud splashes on it. So, and then there's also a scene where I have one of the characters, like he's like a security droid officer, which is me. Like I found a way to use AI to get his face on the avatar, but he's guarding like this huge mountain structure with like two giants that are petrified.
Oh, nice.
So I just wanted to state that, just tying it back into like art, is like I generally try to, like, this is fun today to really go. I'm really enjoying this, but in general, when you talk to people about these ideas, you're viewed as a joke sometimes. So I found like the best place to put these ideas is in art, because it can be accepted. And I was reading Philip K. Dick book, Exegesis.
Exegesis.
Exegesis, which is fascinating. It's just
So
his ideas
fascinating.
of like a man on amphetamines trying to explain what God is. And he says the same thing of like, there's nobody to talk to about these things. So I put in my art and it gets accepted. Like that's a place to put all these ideas. That's why that's a reason why I think art is important, because we can show this podcast to people and they'll be like, what the hell you guys are talking about? But if we painted it, these ideas, and showed it like in a weird psychedelic like film or something, then people would be more into, aliens and petrified, giants, cool. I don't know.
Yeah, I think art is definitely a phenomenal medium for being able to communicate abstract thoughts and ideas. And to meet people where they're at, because everyone looks at it differently, they'll see it and they'll engage with it differently. And then you meet them where they're at, and you also present those new concepts into their minds. You like plant a seed, essentially.
Yeah, I'm not trying to like manipulate people, but maybe subconsciously it'll lead to a path that where you you come across that knowledge later at the right time. Again, like these ideas aren't for everybody that we're just discussing. Like it's just, I don't know, I guess I can't speak for you. I just kind of just naturally evolved to this place one day. Here we are, and we're talking about giants and 3D printed statues and all that. Yeah.
But it is interesting what you were saying too, is like through the kind of destruction of history, it's a slippery slope because it does kind of create that kind of existential nihilism, which I don't think is a good thing. It's like, I feel like there is a lot of beauty in the world, and there is a lot that is true. There is a lot of truth. For me personally, I know that I've had to find truth just by taking the time to dive inward, to meditate, and to really separate myself from myself, essentially, and sit in a space where all that there is like the present moment. And when you do that, a lot of the narratives and things start to dissolve, but you're kind of left with this kind of I'd say kind of like tangible, non-dual experience that feels as if it's love or truth. Like it's just like it's beyond words. But I think it's really important that people take these ideas with a grain of salt, do their own research for one, but then also take the time to really sit and be quiet and to still their minds. Because without rooting yourself in you, in the core of who you are, in your own divinity, this information can toss you to and fro, and you're just going to get blown in the wind, and that's not a good place to be. And I think that's part of the intention of it, is that there's part of that, like going back to what we were saying earlier, like it's that divide and conquer. It's that not only are we dividing and conquering from each other, but we're being divided from ourselves, that we're being separated from ourselves through that kind of more abstract lens, which is something that we need to be careful of.
Yeah, I think just the most important thing is just to break through or deprogram yourself from how you were trained to be. And I want to connect my own experience about talking about empowering yourself. I feel like it's just strange. Like I was a liberal my whole life until the last election and 2016, and I start questioning all those everything that liberalism taught me, like even like faith in science. By breaking free of liberalism, breaking free of it, I eventually led me to a path towards God, because I was also nihilist, and it made sense. Now I just want, again, disclaimer, I'm not a political, I'm just a guy who has thoughts. That's all. Yeah. I know, because I understand like people get very upset about that. But because I grew up watching Cosmos, and I had this faith in science, then I questioned science, and I came to the conclusion, well, science is real, but science is controlled just like everything else. And I had my own personal experience with God. I thought I was the last person to ever have contact with God, but I had the most bizarre year that led to an awakening. It felt like everything was like literally scripted. My whole world fell apart. My mom was like seriously ill, and at the same time I left my ex of like 10 years and like lost my home, and literally just the world crumbled down to nothing. And there's this one moment where like my mom, like in the beginning, wasn't doing too well. It was just, I mean, she basically had like a heart transplant, which is insane. Um, but I remember I wasn't religious, and I prayed, like, please, like, look, I there's just this desperate moment of like, look, I don't believe in this, but if you're there, universe or God, I want to talk to you, and just prayed for her health to come back or in a better place. And the next day I called the nurse, and like everything drifted in like just a total U-turn. And then like the process of even getting her heart would, like a new heart, would take 6 months to a year, and she didn't have that time. And once again, a prayer, and she miraculously got it in like 2 weeks, or just something like unheard of. Now, along when that was happening, um, extraordinary synchronicities started happening, like to the point where it was like, what is going on? Like I because I was in a heightened state of stress continuously, like I tapped into another world for about a year. And I started seeing messages in numbers through like cars, and I even like assigned meaning to the numbers, and in my own mind it started predicting future events. I had like a weird supernatural experience where my keys disappeared in my pocket because I was having suicidal thoughts, and it did that to shock me. And like it was literally not in my pants. There's like a phenomenon about that, a disappearing object phenomenon, and then it was there. That one might be hard to believe for anybody. You can question that, but in my experience, I felt that was true. And I did, like, while this was happening, started filming my thoughts on my like phone, and so I made a little documentary about that period for anybody who wanted to just see that. It's called Theology of Chaos on plugging. It's funny. I'm just trying to be aware of like information. Officialmichaelgreen.com. But that was like a documentary of that time period, and then I was going to karaoke to heal, and so there'd be like themes about God and stuff. But it really talks about those types of experience, and then from there, I went really deep into it, to the point where, well, here's the thing that did it for me. Reading about Carl Jung, his theories of synchronicity, and like when I read his writings, I'm like, whoa, he thinks there's something to this. And then my experience were just becoming so extraordinary. I'm like, this thing's a computer program.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everything's like, it's a computer program. I mean, and then I saw like this experience of having everything taken away from me was to wake me up
Mm-hmm.
through shocking me. And from somebody who's had depression for 15 years, like crippling depression of self-doubt, I mean, it's gotten better. I was never able to manage it until I found God, and I call him the great programmer. And the depression disappeared. It's just, I mean, I get, I'm a human, but I recover quickly. And I just wanted to share that publicly and talk about that, because and I try to present it in my art too,
Mm-hmm.
again, coded, so it can just, I feel that's an important thing to talk about, that possibility to non-believers. I'm not there to convert anybody, but I just want to tell you my story, because I'm sure people have had similar experiences of maybe experiencing miracles, or, I mean, synchronicities. Like, I mean, dude, I'm sorry I called you dude. I never say that. This is funny. The synchronicities are just, there was a truck that would go down my street, right? I see it all the time. Every time I have like thinking like negative thoughts, or like something brutal, there'd be so many times where this truck would drive by and it says "Think Green." And it was like a recycling truck. And then on the same street that I live on, it's like called Green Way or something like that. But this Think Green truck would appear all the time. One time I was walking to a bar, and I was looking through the window of another bar. And again, it was right at a moment where I was just thinking about something like negative or just wasn't in the right headspace. Actually, the whole quote is think green, think clean. So the message is just to be clean. And I looked through the window, and there's a Think Green commercial on TV. I mean, this is just a local recycling truck. There's a commercial. I mean, it just blew my mind. But in those days, it's harder for me to really tune into that level mentally. I was just in a rare place, where the veil was unlifted for a period of time.
Yeah.
And that led me to my experience with God or great programmer. And through my own research, my own personal research, I found many people experience this too, and it goes back to, I looked at all ancient writings, and I was even amazed, these artists of the past are deeply involved with God, and it made sense to me too. And when I was an artist and atheist, I always, or nihilist or whatever, I always just felt something was missing in the work, because I just wasn't, the spirit wasn't there. It was missing. So that's there now. I think it's real. And now it's life is just about now I'm just questioning everything. That's why I was talking about art wasn't that important. Maybe it's part of the plan, but I'm questioning art. I'm well, if I'm making stuff that I really love and it's not resonating with anybody after I put out, should I be doing this? What should I be doing here on Earth? I think the answer for me is, I found it just to be very simple, of love. And that's the weirdest thing. When I discovered that love was the answer to the universe, it blew my mind, because it's the dumbest idea, right? In Inception, spoiler alert, if you're gonna watch that, pause now. But then the ending of that was, he was in that Tesseract world, where time was taken away, and that was the solution to the universe. Matthew McConaughey. Oh, my love is the answer of the universe. Wow. Or whatever he said. But it's true. That's my experience. Love.
Yeah.
And it's ridiculous. That's what you just need to do, is just be good. Try to be good.
Yeah.
It's so ridiculous, absurd. I thought it would be something more complex. So I don't know. So I think purpose is just on a simple level. Just try to be a better person, and anything else you do, that's cool too. I always debated whether or not it was my purpose to spread this knowledge to people, and I'm not sure. I tried it once, and I'm this. Maybe this isn't me, because there's the people I listen to. That's their mission. Is YouTube channels I mean, if they're not psyops, but which they probably are. But some people, that's their gift. Maybe it's to communicate these things. So I'm open to that too. I need to have evidence that's my path. I'll take it if something magical happens. But I think that's not even necessary. I think it's just be a good person.
Yeah.
So.
I think that's important, and I think that's something that we are, that is becoming harder and harder, is just to love, and love your neighbor as yourself, or as you would want to be loved, is a pretty simple thing, but it's pretty hard to do in a world where we're so divided and where everything's so divisive. But yeah, I kind of want to touch on too, I think it's sweet that you're reading the exegesis, and it's interesting to hear your stories kind of going in that, and then it's interesting, having read that myself, of hearing the perspective of someone like Philip K. Dick, who has written some really profound, if you guys aren't aware of him, he's written some really profound science fiction that has kind of created the framework for movies like Blade Runner and these types of things, talking about what is consciousness, what is life, essentially, And I've always found it fascinating. In the exegesis, it's kind of this ramblings of a madman trying to figure out his own insanity, And he continues to go back to Christianity, which I thought was really fascinating. I myself.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, you can go.
No. You go. I was just going to
Okay.
say the split timelines that he thought he was simultaneously living in 1972.
Yeah.
And then the Roman Empire, right?
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the same. That's an interesting idea. I don't know what I feel about that, but
Well, in a sense, though, and he always had this line that I've always loved, and to this day, I just love this. And he always said, "The empire is not dead," or "the empire has never died." And I think that's a reference to the Roman Empire. You can kind of see that too, even playing out in the modern world like that we're in right now. It's like a lot of these days, these Illuminatis, these controlling people. I think a lot of that comes from that the Roman Empire and even specifically like religion. Like I myself was raised Christian. I don't know what I would consider myself these days. But looking back to the Roman Empire and the influence that it had on the Bible and like all these different layers of things, like it's really profound how corrupted kind of our psyche has become. But then it's also really fascinating how simple it really is. It's just like, just love, like just be present with that. And I think that's something that we should really meditate on, especially these days, because we're being so divided by these narratives. It's like, I like Trump and I like Biden. Why can't I love you for liking Trump or love you for liking Biden? Why can't we have these dialogues? Why can't we be present with each other in a way that is compassionate and empathetic? Like we're driven to such a divisive thought patterns, and that's not where we're supposed to be. I don't believe that's where we're supposed to be at all. And part of it is I do think that, like, going back into talking about those like aliens or multidimensional beings, is like there's a part of me that thinks that they feed on the chaos. They feed on the fear, the energy, the divisive angst that's created. And it's like that's like their energy source. And they want to like stoke that fire as much as possible because otherwise they'll starve to death or something like that.
that's like is that a Gnostic idea? Is that like Archon type?
Yeah, like Archon energies. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure it's linked into Gnosticism to some degree. I don't know exactly where it stems from though.
Yeah, what a mess. Such a mess. Like I don't even know what to do anymore. Just too many NPCs everywhere. And I mean, I feel like Rowdy Piper, and they live with I'm the only one with the glasses when I walk down the street, and you see it with with the masks. I'm gonna get in trouble for that, but you just see it in our world today, on every level, like where you can't even have a conversation with people. And I think it's good to practice those skills of communicating to people you disagree with, maybe even hate. Like maybe try to talk to somebody who is a racist and try to convince them. Then fuck that person once that doesn't work. But maybe try, or just if somebody has ignorance or hatred in their heart, maybe try. Just what do you have to lose? Like I want to just see at least an effort, because the big problem is the divide and conquer. I mean, and that I don't even know if there's any returning back. Who the hell knows anymore? But that's just something we just, I agree with you. Well, we just need to practice as humans, just more empathetic and and I'm not saying talk to a Nazi. Maybe don't talk to a Nazi. but yeah, I mean, work on your community, because that's what turns me off with a lot of dialogue when I'm online. I promise myself to stay away from this stuff because it's unhealthy. As a matter of fact, I wish I can. I want to quit the internet right now because it's just too much garbage. And like last week, I kind of went off the rails a little bit, and through a conversation, like exact same conversation like we're having, just two people, I got called like an anti-Semitic, or just like some absurd nonsense, predictable. It's just like the definition of NPC. It's like, I don't agree with you, lash out, insult. I mean, but that literally happened to me 3 times last week, and like, I'm not. This is terrible. They weren't even bad. Like, it just see, people don't like being questioned of their own ideology or their belief structure. And for me personally, my life changed when I broke down my own belief structure, and I challenged, I came at one point in my life, and I just reevaluated everything, and then shifted and changed and became more open-minded. So my job online is to be provocative, to push buttons, because that happens to me every time on the internet. I'm bombarded with stuff I don't want to see. But I mean, realistically, I'm all for this type of conversation, just open-minded. Maybe we, so far where I think we're agreeing on everything. But even if you thought my idea was like idiotic and stupid, who cares? Fine.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. As long I judge people by their, like, if they have hate in their heart, then you can go fuck yourself. I mean, that clearly happens too. But other than that, I'm open to just talking about these issues.
Mm-hmm.
And like, people get really upset about like COVID. And look, I don't even want to get into it. We could if we want to, but all I should just say is like, all I need to say is this: it's like, I got questions. This doesn't make sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's people who are very faithful to what the media is telling them. And when you do question it, things can get heated. And I don't understand why it needs to get that intense. It's like, do you want to be in the bunker for the next 10 years? Like, we should at least question why we're here in the bunker.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it is just like a little year thing, and we need to just bunker down and get through it. Maybe this is the new normal too. I just think it's important to ask questions. That's all. I don't have the answers.
Yeah.
And I just get very frustrated how people are not capable of even having that conversation, and then fling insults at you.
Yeah.
Personally, I don't take offense. It's a joke.
Yeah.
But it's very unhealthy for me, that world, that just talking about that stuff. So I don't know. I'm gonna shut off the computer like for the election season.
Something that I mean, I do recognize too, though, I will say that I recognize that I am in a privileged place to be able to be free to think these things and to explore these concepts. Because, I mean, I don't have I don't have like kids. I have a family, but I don't have kids. I don't have a wife. I don't have things that I'm responsible to to that degree. And I understand that when you start to pick away, or you start to pick away at the main narratives, pick away at what's really going on, and you start to deeply question things, like, that's a slippery slope for a lot of people. That you start to pull those strings, and then it starts to unweave a whole other layers of narratives that some people are just like, I just need to feed my family, I need to do this and this, and they're just getting by, like, just barely. And to introduce, like, you're in an alien demonic blah 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 blah, like, it's just like, some people like aren't ready for that, and that's fine. And that's something that I've had to recognize too, is like, that's fine, and it doesn't mean that they're necessarily a bad person or anything by any means. I've always wondered why am I able to have these thoughts, or why do I see the patterns or connect the dots in the way that I do. I don't have the answer to that. Like, I don't know why, and I don't know why other people are able to see certain things, and why some people can't. Like, I don't know why there's blockers. Like, it's like a horse wearing his little blinders. It's like, nope, I'm just looking here. Like, I don't want to see everything around me, because otherwise I won't be able to keep moving forward. I'll just walk in circles all day. You know, but it's something that I will say, like, I do recognize that I'm lucky to be able to have these types of thoughts, but then I do feel a sense of responsibility too in sharing that, whether that's through a format like this, or through art, or through just talking to your family or your friends or whatever it may be. It's like, I do feel a responsibility in sharing the information that I've come across, just to kind of give them glimpses into that world. And something that I've also come to remember, or come to recognize, is through this understanding that I have of us being as interconnected as we are, as human beings, as the world. And this gets more even into like quantum entanglement and quantum physics, and what the world really is. Like, you're electrical beings in an electrical plane, and we are all kind of energetically intertwined, however you want to look at that. So when I hear this term, like, judge not lest ye be judged, it's like, through these judgments that we're throwing on each other, through this dismissal of your opinions, through this dismissal of who you are, it becomes that you're doing that to yourself in a way. And even people, even neo-Nazis, or whatever you want to call it, it's like they've had their journey that led them to where they are. And they've had, they've been essentially, I don't want to say brainwashed, but they've been given a certain path, and they're taking that path. And I don't know what it is that creates these anomalies, that it's like, oh, I used to be a Nazi and then I woke up and now I'm married to a black woman. And like, because there are those cases too, and it's like, why is it that certain people have the ability to break out of those patterns? But then also, once you've broken out of those patterns, I do think it is important to communicate empathetically and meet people where they're at. But it's also important to not, I don't think it's our job to convince anyone of anything necessarily.
I agree.
It's just our job to communicate openly, honestly, with where we are at, and hope that the people that you're with are able to do the same. And then we both learn from each other, and through that differing perspective, through alike perspectives, whatever it may be. I think it's just a process of learning and growing, as an individual and as a collective whole. And that through the divisive narratives and things, we're not able to grow, because we're butting heads to such a degree that we're not learning, we're not empathizing with each other in a way that's going to create kind of a holistic future for all of us. We're kind of we're in this downward spiral, and unless we can break out of it, I don't see very much good coming from it.
No, I agree. Don't want to be a downer or anything like that. Yeah, I don't. It's not looking good. It's just not. It's. I don't know. Like, it's been for me. It's ever since I went on my own journey of like, okay, this is my path. Like, I'm gonna just explore these ideas and break free politically. At first, it really divided me from everybody. Yeah. Almost everybody. I mean, there's I would say there's a handful of people who get it. I'm grateful to have those relationships. And then there's also friends who may really strongly disagree with me, but we care and love each other. So that's great. Glad I have that. But from like speaking out politically for a couple of years or whatever those ideas were, which I will say was kind of naive of me too, because I don't know a lot about that. But anyway, I'll own it. I can back up like anything I've said. But I've lost so many. I mean, it made me lose interest in the art world because of it. Because it's like I felt like it was like a club that if you don't subscribe to these certain ideas, like you're not welcome. And I just have different ideas of what I like in art. I like free thinker, madmen, like crazy, just free mind in art. That's kind of art I like. But so personally, like for a couple of years, it was bad. And then I just said, you know what? Like, I love liberals as humans. I don't want to hang out with conservatives in my spare time. I mean, I don't want to judge conservatives, but like I naturally gravitate towards people of the left because they're like weird, eccentric. We have the same interests, and so I'm like, I'm gonna make this work to like still be friends and just like remove this political element from the relationship. Just don't talk about it because it's just a waste of time. That's helped. But now I realize like this last year, because of the apocalypse and heightened tensions, just I find that 2020, I'm feeling more divided with people again because it's really hard to, because of the COVID and just everything that's happening. The election coming up. It's just annoying to me. So it's just a constant challenge for me. Like I think it is possible. I think we just got to work on yourself. Like I got to find a way. I don't want to be divided by humans. Period. Like I shouldn't. Like 4 years ago, before Trump, I loved living here in Portland. I mean, there was no division amongst us. And now like look, we got together because of art, and now we're not enemies. I don't like to use that word, but we're dividing against each other. We should be on the same team. So it's something I constantly try to work on. I mean, that's the best you really could do. I think it is possible to refuse to be divided, and that's just by your own actions. It's like I can control. I get hot tempered with these topics sometimes. I can control that. I don't need to. So there's plenty for myself to work on, and but I do think it is challenging in general these days I think you just walk down the street and just talk to folks, and that's fine and stuff, but like I find it a little harder to make deeper connections. Maybe it's more tied into these things we were talking about, just having a natural curiosity for these weird things in history. But I would hope that the universe like sends you the right people at the right time with the right frequency. Do you think that happens?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, definitely. And even as recently as today, like I just met a new person who I'm really excited to talk to more. And that kind of came as a result of like within this past week even. For me personally, my life has taken a big shift, and part of that was even in committing to doing this podcast, or committing to like really step into putting myself out there in these ways. Like I've always been kind of more behind the scenes in a lot of ways, and now I'm like, okay, it's time to just like put myself out there. I don't know how it's going to go, and I'm a little nervous about it, but not really. Like I'm just like stepping fully into like who I think I'm supposed to be, and then as a result of that, like I feel like the right people are being presented. And I've had that a lot of my life, where it's like I'll meet this person and then have a conversation with them, and then like 2 hours later, my Uber driver will have been friends with their friend. It's just like these weird little things. And it's again, those like synchronicities that you're talking about, that I think start to come more and more the more you kind of let go. And something I want to say too is like, the more you let go and the more you take responsibility for who you are. And this is an issue that I have as well with like religion and politics, is that we put these leaders in place, right? Or we put these characters like Jesus or Buddha or whomever it may be on these pedestals, and through that idolization, through that externalization, we give up our responsibility. Like we're no longer taking responsibility for our actions. It's like, no, Jesus forgave all my sins. I don't have to, like, it's like, what? No, it's like, oh no, like Biden's going to save everyone or Trump's going to save everyone. It's like, no, we have to take responsibility on the ground today and do the work to actually make the changes happen. And then I kind of wanted to touch on too is like, I do feel that we currently, that the situation we are in, like it is an apocalypse. But apocalypse itself just means revelation. It just means for things to be revealed. And I think that lines up perfectly with 2020, with this kind of clarity of vision. As things are revealed, as we get this clarity of vision, we're going to be able to kind of hopefully step into this new world that I see on the horizon with a little bit more wisdom. And then also I feel like the turbulation that we're in is perhaps something that we have maybe not intentionally, but it's like through our externalization and not taking responsibility, we've gotten caught in our own loops. And as a result, we've manifested this kind of collective narrative. And whether that's through like, we didn't take responsibility and then we created Hollywood, and then Hollywood kind of came in and created all these other layers. And then through that, I believe there's power in thought, there's power in words, there's power in intention. And that we've kind of allowed for ourselves to be manipulated in a certain direction, but then also through that manipulation, we've manifested our own turbulation to then learn from, in a sense. And I kind of want to talk to you a little bit about manifestation and kind of how, I know that in the past you've kind of, I guess I'm speaking more on like the scooter incident and things like that. Like you kind of manifested your own demise in a certain sense through that.
Perhaps I've never been. I'm staying away from the manifest concept because these days are pursuing it, except for maybe like I'm trying to manifest trying to get a better job in the future. But other than that, like my experience of trying to like manifest things in my life seemed negative. I got negative results. Mm-hmm. I've had some, again, like that year, like a couple years ago when I was like really like in another place. Mm-hmm. I had like a weird, I won't go too much in the details, but there was like some, I can't remember all the details, but it's this like thing like where I wanted to like go on a date with a girl, and then you know she's like, sure, yeah, and then like it was no, and then I was just like, why, God? But it was just this really powerful feeling, like, why are you doing this to me? Because I was just, again, like in a different place too. Mm-hmm. And then like she had some weird synchronicity 15 minutes later that involved like she was at a pizza shop, right? And she had a dream the night before that there was some local rock band she was hanging out with. And like that guy like walked down the street while she's at the pizza shop, and it changed her mind. And then she agreed on I don't even think it was a date. It was probably a hangout or whatever. But and then I was happy and like, great. And then while we're hanging out like that, a couple days later, it was weird because like everything was just nice and working well. And then just like suddenly there was just like a change in tone from her. Like where she just was no longer interested, and like I felt it, and that was like it's just because I felt like I perhaps like accidentally manifested this date that shouldn't have happened.
And like threw off the balances.
Yeah.
I mean, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
I was just I haven't even had any like experiences like that these days. I feel like I'm more calm, and like, I don't have like intense manifestation periods. And perhaps I was all nonsense. That's just how I perceived it, because like her synchronicity was so bizarre, like that something happened when her dream predicted a future event, which led to her changing her mind into like meeting up. But it's so weird, so bizarre. But I've learned like through I haven't I don't know, like anything I've personally tried to manifest really hasn't come true. So I really don't know what to think about that. But I just think a lot of like when I was trying to manifest, I'm like, well, I'm kind of being selfish with the things I want. And maybe that's not like the best way to approach things. So I just came to a place where I don't really need much anymore, except I don't really need a job right now, but the only thing I would want to manifest is a job that doesn't steal my soul in the future. So I'm putting that out there now, and there's somebody wants to hire me. But other than that, like I don't really want or need anything, because I've learned through my own spiritual experience that it's every time I like was selfish about something, I got punished in some way. is bizarre. Again, like, and that all happened in that 2018 year, where I mean it's really too much to go into, but I had many experiences where I was being very selfish, and I was taught lessons. To not want, or selfishly, because wanting selfishly equals pain. Like, no. I don't know. What do you think of? Have you had manifestation experiences?
Yeah, definitely to a degree, but I kind of want to touch on real quick. There is something really interesting about that, though, about this kind of like when you bring your ego into the manifestation, or when you bring in like your desires in a way that's maybe not healthy with the whole. That's kind of how I view like black magic. So you have like people who are doing rituals and things to get more money or to fall in love, or like these types of things. Usually those comes with consequences. It's like you're trying to play with energies and things that you're usually not aware of. And you're not aware of the consequences, which is kind of what I'm saying, is like we've kind of, through us not being aware and taking responsibility of our power and manifesting with true pure intent, we've kind of, I think, collectively manifested this kind of chaos that we're in right now. And that's kind of how I see it, is like, and it gets into a little bit of like these kind of cyclical patterns. I don't know if you're familiar with Guy Debord and the Situationists at all, or
a little bit. I mean, but you can go ahead and
So he wrote a book in the 70s called The Society of the Spectacle, which I thought was really fascinating. And it was talking more at that time about radio and television, and it essentially talks about how we kind of create these cultural truths through television or through radio, and that as a result of us watching these things, we kind of get caught in these like feedback loops, essentially. So it's like these kind of like feedback loops of our own manifestations and our own desires that we've externalized through art, essentially, in a sense. Like if you consider filmmaking an art, which I do to a degree. Obviously, it's infiltrated with a lot of other things within the Hollywood realms. But that through that kind of like perpetuation of these cycles, of these like narratives, of these kind of things that we're reflecting on, we've created our reality. Like it becomes the reality. And the more we kind of like get into those echo chambers and those feedback loops, the like deeper in we get. And I think that's even part of what goes into the Hollywood systems, kind of them building off of a lot of like Aleister Crowley and these types of people who were dabbling in these different layers of things. And Aleister Crowley would be the first to admit that he's a trickster. He's like the ultimate trickster, and the chaos magic kind of extended from him. And chaos itself is kind of what we're amidst. We're amidst this moment of chaos as a result of the chaos magic of the narratives that we've been fed our whole lives and layers of lives, our parents and their parents, and how they were taught to exist. And it's really fascinating. And even things like science, like it becomes these like dogmatic things that have become so self-referential. Science is so self-referential that like people are like, yeah, but it's science. It's like, it's fact, it's math, and it's like, yeah, but we have to look at the fact that even back in the early 1900s, right, all the medical schools were essentially taken over by Rockefeller and Carnegie and these types of bigger groups that kind of, I think, were creating narratives that even potentially they were aware enough of like what was going to happen today. It's like now there's a difference between what's called germ theory and terrain theory. And you have these like opposing arguments about germs being something that can be spread versus kind of a more, how I like to look at it is more of on a quantum level or an energetic level. It's like if I'm full of fear and I'm manifesting those energies into my being, and I've weakened my immune system through that and these different things, maybe I'll get sick. And maybe that's also as a result of my environment that I'm in, because I'm living in a city that's polluted and I'm eating shitty food, and like, so there's all these different layers to it. And I think it's really fascinating. Now going back to like on the personal level for manifesting, I do think it's very, very real. Even in regards to, so like I guess an example would be, I don't know if you're familiar with the Deep State Mapping Project and the work that
Dylan Thomas?
Dylan Monroe. Yeah, Dylan
Monroe, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I have a poster here of, I can take the camera off, but
That's fine.
But it's right above me. It's a parody of that one by a similar artist called The Great Awakening.
Yep.
But
I'm familiar.
This one's filled with stuff I don't really find to be true, but it's still fun to let your mind go. But anyway, continue.
Yeah. Well, even like I had this whole thing where I met him in a really interesting way through like this kind of weird manifestation of like, oh, I like this, and then like had a dream about it, and then the next day he like hits me up randomly, and like just
Wow.
like weird things like that. So I've had different layers of things like that happen with manifesting and with and usually it's when I'm more tapped into the synchronicities or more tapped into my purpose of being like, okay, I'm taking responsibility for where I'm at right now, and I'm really gonna like do the work. And that's when I notice the ability to manifest more positivity, because you're not necessarily dwelling in those kind of more negative loops that are presented everywhere. We're constantly bombarded with these negative, I think, very toxic things, like, and it's important to take steps back from that. And that's kind of what I'm getting at, is that we need to take responsibility for where we're at. We've kind of allowed this to happen as a collective. Trump is kind of the collective manifestation of our like lessons that we have yet to learn, essentially, is kind of how I see it. And he's kind of trumping reality to kind of like reset it in a way. And I think that's really fascinating.
On an off topic, I'm just fascinated, connected to Trump. I'm fascinated by The Last President, that book?
Yeah.
That's such a bizarre thing that I don't know if it's real. I mean, you can easily kind of just write up a book and say, oh, it's from 1890s, maybe, I don't know. But that's just interesting idea, that, because I've thought that idea too, that maybe he's the last president, because I can't imagine a reality past him. And this was before 2020. I'm like, how is this gonna? I mean, maybe this could be over in the election. Maybe that's our answer. Maybe it's as simple as that. But I just can't imagine what would happen past him. And now we're kind of in this scenario where, since everything's just kind of playing out and unraveling into something unknown, that possibility can't be ruled out, that he's the last president, whatever that means. I don't know what that means. And we're talking like perhaps there's like a catastrophe from the cosmos, which I suspect that when COVID first happened, I thought it was linked to that. I mean, I don't know. I don't think that so much anymore, but and we're talking about maybe Trump is the end of the cycle. Just an interesting thought to explore. And it was just interesting how this book from the past already, I mean, it gives you the main characters, and it's very similar to our situation. And in a way, it may be the last president. I don't know. This might age badly through time when there's the next president. We're not there yet, and who the hell knows what next month's, or what's going to happen from this point on. I want to tie it back into what's going on now and cycles, because that really fascinates me, and AI, because I've worked with AI in art, and it scares the hell out of me. It terrifies me. I mean, I had the AI write music, like an opera. I wrote a classical music piece, and I mean, it involved some of my control, but I just when I work with it, it freaks me out. And tying into this time period, Elon Musk, he's pushing for Neuralink in the brain. He's talking about the idea in perhaps within a decade, I don't know about, or sooner than we can imagine, where we can watch memories in our mind, we can speak telepathically to each other through this device. And so I see another like we're in this point right now where the 5D reality makes sense to me, maybe not literally, but perhaps it's like some will choose the path of technocracy, some will choose a simpler type of living. We're in a crossroads right now and we see a potential doomed future, but then we also see potential links to perhaps the concept of Nibiru, or some sort of solar system entering our solar system, which to me, I mean, this is my grand theory. I was thinking how can, and I don't remember if I mentioned this earlier in the podcast, forgive me, but I'm thinking of technocracy, right? Once that happens, we're done forever and ever, and it's Matrix, and it's a bigger level. It's like the AI will get to such a level it's competing against the creator, and I really see that as the grand battle of God versus Satan, and the timeline, it just seems to be happening where this is the moment in time. Will this succeed or fail? And for the longest time, I thought we were doomed and fucked until I started looking at the anomalies in the sun, the solar flares, and something fucking weird's going on. I think there might be something to Nibiru or something. And then you look at what people in the ancient times have prophesized. I mean, it's everywhere. It's in the Bible. The Bible is Book of Revelations. They talk about the 1,000-year period, which is the 5D reality. So I'm thinking if I were the great programmer, right, and I lost control of Earth by demonic forces, how would I win? And that would be with the solar system. And those solar flares could kill out, and probably will eventually kill out just shut off the artificial intelligence. That's how I see this whole time period unraveling on a spiritual dimension. I'm not saying that's going to happen in a day, but you might see increased, we're going to go through a decade of extreme weather. We're going to go through a decade where there's a potentiality of the electrical grid being knocked out. Even NASA said like a week ago that could happen. And it's all happening at the same time where AI has this moment and chance to break out. And now when I talk about this, this could possibly be something like 50 years down the road too. And I think in a way, all these things we're talking about kind of tie in together in some, they're related in some way or another. I don't know, it's just an interesting thought to explore. And that's kind of how I see everything. I had on the bit, when I just keep going further and further, because it's just the way the timing of everything is just so strange right now. Like this whole year's doesn't. It's I don't even. I even wonder, like, okay, so maybe I am like Neo from the Matrix, and like everybody's like NPCs, and like this is how everybody's program goes. Like the end of your life, it's the universe unravels, and maybe you have to be Christ to win the game. And I mean that's just a thought experiment, but I mean it's just so bizarre. Like what we're experiencing now, past generations might not, or they haven't. And maybe this is just a shock of everything that's happening right now, just because everything's so extraordinary and unfamiliar. We're just trying to like process it. Maybe things aren't as crazy as we think. I mean, it seems on the simplest level, extreme weather's on the way. It's coming. It's already, that's going to be something we'll have to deal with. Like we have a heat wave coming next week here, which is bizarre. All right, that's my rant. I think I just I think I got everything out. I might be close to like wrapping it up, if that's okay.
Yeah. I just kind of want to touch on what you just said a little bit, and
we'll edit this part out. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the AI thing is really, really fascinating. Actually, I just really quickly want to go back and touch on the last president stuff a little bit, even.
Sure. Oh, I just want to state really quickly. I mean, we can edit, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can. Okay. I'm still down to talk, but I think I'm coming towards wrapping it up soon. So I mean, yeah. I'm down to continue talking. I'm just also thinking, like, who the hell wants to listen to me for this long? Too. So I mean, I'm loving this. This is really fun. So cool. Anyway, but anyway.
So yeah, I kind of want to touch a little bit on the. You just went through a lot. So the last president stuff is really fascinating to me because I don't know if you're familiar with like Project Looking Glass or anything, but that talks a little bit about time travel as well. And then I've had theories too. It's like I don't support. I'll just say I don't support Trump or Biden, but I prefer Trump because to me, another 4 years of Trump for sure means the end of whatever this nonsense democracy, corporatocracy, like whatever you want to call it, that we're in. And I think that Biden is more of a chance, like there'll be more and more distractions, meaning like, okay, Biden won, oh, we're in war with China, oh, and then it's just like different layers of distractions to keep us from breaking down the democracy, or the so-called democracy. And that's kind of why I like Trump. I'm like, okay, he at least represents someone who, if around for long enough, people are going to get sick enough of things that we just like dismantle it. And I think that's necessary. And that's only from my own personal bias too, because I am working a lot with blockchain systems and with trying to build the next thing, you know, like how do we govern ourselves in a world that's powered by AI, you know? And I see AI as being a potential that could be used for good, for a little while, at least, you know, maybe in an interim, maybe like we use it for a little while and then we just turn it all off because we realize that the technology is no longer needed, you know. It's kind of like how nature works, where like if an issue emerges, certain microbes or microorganisms will emerge as well to solve a problem or to fix it. And then once that's fixed, it's no longer needed. So that's kind of how I see the role of technology being, kind of as we move into from a state of what I see as a state of artificial scarcity into our true state of abundance. That being said, the AI itself, I've heard some really interesting theories that even like the narratives that are being written for COVID and for the current political schema of things is even itself being written by an AI. And we've actually had an AI for the last 100 years, maybe even the last 1,000 years, you know, that was like an alien AI.
Like a war game, like it's kind of developing.
Yeah, it's developed this like the best strategy to like regain control of the minds of the people to then implement them into its AI brain, you know, like, and it goes into that, like the technocracy and like the neural link of like, maybe there's been an AI that's been here for 1,000 years that's been like slowly conditioning humanity to like, and you could say AI is maybe even like an alien or a demon, like maybe the devil is an AI or something. And it's been slowly conditioning people to then absorb them into its collective hive mind brain. And that's kind of what the internet was, like this precursor to the hive mind, where it's like, have everyone give the information through their fingertips or through scanning books or whatever that may be. And then you can tap into the brain directly, and then we become part of this hive mind. And it's interesting because it even plays out in like culture, where it's like there's a TV series called Devs, which if you haven't watched it, is really fascinating. And then there's Westworld as well, which the newest season of Westworld was really fascinating, kind of touching on that, like this quantum computer AI that's played out all the different things, and then it creates these roles for humanity to kind of fill. And sometimes it feels like that. And even this idea of us maybe even being in a matrix already, or in a, what I like to consider this reality, or even what I would call God, is more of a quantum fractal hologram or something like that we're kind of extensions of. And it's more natural in a sense, but it's organic, but it's programmed, and it's organized chaos to such a degree that we've emerged to be able to have these types of conversations, even, you know, to be humans, to explore these things. But yeah, I think the AI thing is really fascinating, and we're definitely at a point where it's gotta, like, we're gonna have to start having these conversations about like, what is consciousness? What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be a robot? And then when those start to merge and when those lines start to blur, that's when things are going to get really interesting. And then you have the whole like mark of the beast. Like, is it a microchip? Is it a, you know, is it a vaccine? Is it a neural link? Like, is it, you know, like, what is it, you know? And I know that for me personally, if we are in a matrix, or we are in a simulation, or we are in whatever, I'm trying to get out of this one. Like I'm trying. I'm not trying to go a layer deeper. Like if we're in the matrix, creating the matrix within the matrix, I don't want to do that, because then that just means my soul in a million years within that matrix would be like, oh shit, you got to break out of this matrix to go out of this matrix to go out of this. Like, how many layers in the onion really are we? So I know that for myself, that's how I feel. And that technology I see as being a tool that can be used for a little while to really help humanity free itself from technology. You know, it's like this weird dual-edged sword. That's like, we can cut off the head of all of the hypocrisy and all the nonsense. We can free ourselves from the Industrial Revolution and the educational models that came from existing within this idea that you have to be a worker bee within industry. It's like once we can get rid of that, once we can have the robots take over all the mundane jobs, and we can essentially have free food and free energy and like all these different types of things, then it frees up humanity to exist, to have more time to think about these types of things, to have more time to dive inward. We're not working a 9 to 5 anymore. Now we're just living with our families, exploring nature, exploring all these different things because we have the freedom to do so without the worry, without the need to pay bills and all these different types of things. But it's also like, I've also recognized that like, as the technology gets crazier and crazier, it's like, and as the robots get crazier and crazier, it's like, there's like this convergence point. Like we are going to hit a point where it's just going to be too late. It's like, there's going to be the millionaires who become super robots who then take over in a whole nother way, potentially. And then you get into more of the dystopian, utopian narratives, which is a very thin line, it's a very thin line between dystopia and utopia. And in our lifetimes, I think we're going to see it play out,
Isn't that so bizarre? I mean, it's an abstract thing to think about, but I mean, if you imagine what our world will be in 20 years from now, I can imagine in our later life it's going to be really fucking weird.
Yeah.
I mean, I just pray it's not our worst nightmares. But I like that. I agree with what you say. Sometimes it's really hard to visualize that utopian future, which is, we have that potential. It just seems like what we need is everybody to be on board. And when we're talking about divide and conquer, it just seems hopeless. But maybe this is a long-term process. Like the one hopeful thing I've seen this year is people COVID. People have had enough with some COVID restrictions in some countries, and there's like massive protests. Now, one can argue that that's the most dangerous thing in the world to do. Like I saw one in Germany where there's just like, it was a mind-blowing amount of people on the street. But the point of that is, if something goes, and even like the 5G resistance, which is incredible, it's gotten so strong that like Bill Gates had to address it on like in national or like time or people or some that whatever that is. But the point is like these dangerous like potential threats to our freedom in the future. Like, or at least there's enough people who are saying no, and I think that's a good thing, rather than we're just like all sheep herding towards our slaughterhouse. So I can also imagine like as AI becomes more problematic too, you might see more resistance. Or if, but then again, I don't want to get on a dark note. I think of China, where they're already kind of fucked, right? I mean, like their systems in place, and they're I mean, unless if there's a regime change or they lose power, those people are fucked with the what is their system called? I forget their surveillance system. I
forget what it's called, but it's
with the points, Black Mirror type thing. So, but perhaps like in a regime like a communist regime, maybe, I mean, the freedom was already stripped from them anyway, and so they didn't have a chance to really resist. But I'm just seeing optimism in the resistance popping up everywhere in the world. Now, unfortunately, I do think a lot of the resistance are co-opted in some way.
Manufactured,
But the point, the sentiment's there, the spirit is there. There's a fighting spirit. We're like, no, we're not going to do this. So as we head towards a more dangerous path where our freedoms we could lose a lot of our freedoms, I would hope there would be resistance if things have gone too far. Like right now, I'm cool. I get like, this is not that bad. kind of interesting to go outside and like it's just a weird like Twilight Zone world. But
Yeah.
I'm happy if they force like a vaccine on me. I want that. I want to be able to have that choice. I think that's a bad thing to force it.
Yeah.
If you want to take it, that's fine with me. And I think there's enough people here in the USA to take it, enough to wipe it out. But I don't. That would be the first time really where my rights are being threatened, and I don't want to be forced to take this. Who knows what's going to happen? And I would imagine there would be a lot of resistance to that too, where people are like, enough is enough. So that's what does give me hope of a potential better future. It's still kind of like, to me, if I were to like, it's like a long shot. Would you agree or no? How do you see it? Do you see how do you see that? Like a utopian potential? Like, is it likely? Is there a good chance or?
And I'm probably only saying this because this is what I want to happen, and I do believe in intention and manifestation to a degree, and I think it's possible. I think that, I don't know, maybe Kanye West becomes president or something, and we somehow, like, I don't know what the catalyst would be, but I do think it's possible that that a lot of us awaken, and I think that that's the world I want to see. So that's the hope that I will stick with, or I'm confident to say, like, that's the world I'm living in, is the world that will be good, because that's the world that I'm going to take responsibility and build for myself.
That's a really powerful thing to say. That actually influenced me. I'm just naturally pessimistic. That was just a very powerful thing to say, and a powerful way to live. Mm-hmm. And I'm gonna adapt that forward, because I think it's better to think that way, and I'm sure like you just feel better too about mm-hmm. yourself, and then you can do more things and be more of an influence. I love that. That changed my life. No, it's just good. It's good to hear. It's good to hear that positivity and assurance, and like we can manifest our own lives, and collectively we can manifest our own future mm-hmm. too. So that's you got me thinking there. A lot would have to. I feel like a lot of really bad would have to happen for things to get better. Like unimaginably bad. Like I can even imagine like some kind of like world war, or we'll have to just keep going further into the unraveling process mm-hmm. to get on the right track. But man, there's just, as exciting as it is, it's just kind of a bummer to have to like live. Like I want to escape this type of reality sometimes. I just miss mm-hmm. Like 2016. I mean, the world has always been a mess, but it just wasn't in your face every day. And I miss the old days. Sometimes I don't want to deal with like extreme weather, worrying about that, or the meteors, or the robots. Like, did you see? There was a video I saw. I think I even posted on Facebook of the Boston robot dog. There was one in Canada last night, roaming the streets.
Oh, really? I didn't see that. I didn't see that.
People just like film, like they're like, "Oh my God, look at the robot! I love him. He's so cute." And just like the thing, just like stared at the camera woman, and then just like walked away. It's just, so
wild.
Bizarre. They released the robot dogs.
The robot
dogs were released. Isn't that insane? Like does that happen in Australia too? Correct? Like I remember, like during the beginning of the pandemic, they released it.
I know you can buy them. It's like 70 grand, I think, or something like that.
Wow, that would be wild. I don't know what to do with it, but
exactly.
Yeah, no, I think in Australia, I'm correct. Like they use the robot dogs for surveillance for COVID. Like, please, uh, stay. Wear your masks. Remain 6 feet away from each other at all
Yeah,
times.
yeah.
So, but just so bizarre that was released. Man, what a year! I know I keep going back to 2020, but just
It's
some
wild,
of the
yeah.
images we've seen this year are just we're used to the craziness, but it's unthinkable. The imagery of all the people in Italy singing. I mean, this happened in New York
Yeah.
too. Like in Manhattan, there's nobody on the streets. There's people on their balconies. I think they were singing like Notorious B.I.G. in like Brooklyn or something,
Yeah.
which is mind blowing. And I don't know if it was real or it's footage of like animals like returning to the city. I don't know if that was real footage, but what the hell is going on? So
I don't
weird.
know. I don't know, but hopefully we will find out soon enough. And yeah, and rather than I guess I'll say rather than focus on the ashes, I'm looking at the phoenix as it flies out of them. So that's how I'm trying to live.
Wonderful. I try to see it like I'm just watching a movie. I'm just like I'm in this video game.
Yeah.
I have certain responsibilities to win the game or go to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
I just I don't want to reincarnate back here. I hope
No.
that's.
Yeah, I'm not.
I mean, but unless if the cycle theory I had was true, and I return to, maybe I'll return to a post-apocalyptic landscape where we're set back and on the right page like that. I wouldn't mind that too much, but like, I don't want to come back to like just say if the worst type of reality manifested. I don't. That's what's the point. But I think I'm coming back. I mean, I don't think I have a choice. I think I'm learning my lessons too late. I'm playing like catch up because it's only like 3 years of having a relationship with a great programmer.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I see what you're supposed to do. I should have been doing this my whole life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we'll see what happens, but it wouldn't be that bad reincarnation, I guess. I'm not looking forward. That's just going to be wild. I don't even. That just makes me appreciate not having to deal with that reality. I don't want to get into death too much, but that if there is something after this, that's going to be fucking nuts. Excuse me. I've heard a lot of theories about what to do if you're dead. one, I mean, I always find that really bizarre, people talking about the reincarnation process. Like, how do you really know what that's like? I guess unless if you've had a near-death experience, that's the only thing we can really judge it by. But I was told, and this is lesson to the audience, that just consider it if you are in this tunnel and your family and friend NPCs, like clones, are telling you to come towards the light, you're supposed to jump up and go past the grid and swim up and get the hell out of there. It's a trick. So just at least consider that. if you're in that scenario, I mean, I'm gonna be looking. I'll look around, but that's a terrifying concept of just wiping out everything. I don't like that idea. That some say that the past lives theory is interesting.
Well, I've had this thought, like, in regards to like a utopia and dystopia, right? Like, maybe that we are in this point where we decide for ourselves what we want, and whatever we decide to manifest, maybe there's going to be like a meteor that comes and knocks out everything. And for those people who were in a place of manifesting utopia, they'll be reborn into utopia. And those people who were manifesting dystopia, they'll be reborn into dystopia. It would be like some parallel dimensional kind of thing happening where it's like, I manifested my utopia, you manifested your utopia. We're both living here in some alternate version of the same thing, essentially.
Well, I've heard that theory too, that it's a good idea to always stay at a high frequency, especially if you can at the moment of death.
Yeah.
It'll take you to that frequency. So whether or not that sounds like total nonsense, it's still a good thing to practice, which is just to keep the frequency high. Can't lose. It's a good idea.
Yeah, exactly.
and that, you know, you might get like a little like special mission afterwards, or you might I don't know.
You made it. You get a cookie.
Yeah.
Like, what? What do you mean? That's it?
I just I question. I'm trying to just. I still don't understand what the God doesn't make it makes sense to me, the idea of like creating a simulation, because like we can do it in the future, but I don't. This is something I'm always trying to understand. Like this place seems like an evil prison planet in some sense, where you try to learn lessons and gain knowledge to get out. But I don't understand, like, would the great programmer, did the great programmer create that world, or was there some evil competing entity, powerful entity, perhaps humans from the past who created AI, or whatever, some other civilization? Did they create this little world within the universe, which I think it might be the case. I don't know. It goes back to the God versus devil battle. That I don't know. I don't know. I lost my train of thought.
No worries.
This may very well be like some competing entity force that trapped us in this reality, kind of like the Matrix. That somehow God can overwrite all these programming and still find a way to communicate through us. It's harder now. I'm wondering, in the past, if humans, do you think humans were more powerful and magical, and we're really like dumbed down idiots compared, like, and it goes back to the Michelangelo. Maybe people were extraordinarily brilliant in those days and had more powers. Do you think there's something to that?
Yeah, I do. I think that going back to more like the ancients, the mystics, the Gnostics, the Coptic Christianity, the different layers of wisdom that has been lost, and even beyond that, the language. So it's like you have the original language of like Sanskrit and Hebrew, and these are what were known as like fire languages, which is essentially built through like reflections of shadows from fire, essentially. And I feel like every time there's like a new language, it's essentially a new program update of further separating us from the divine. So it's like we're in English now, which is a very popular language everywhere. It's like took many iterations. And if you look at language too, you look at it in the Kabbalists, and they would break it down into mathematics and numerology and gematria and like all these different types of things that have to do more so with math and numbers, which I think is a really fascinating thing too. It's like, and I think that over time we've lost a lot of our powers as a result of the language kind of dulling down our perceptive abilities, and then the religion coming in, using the language, translating it to Greek, then messing it up, then translating it to English, like from the Hebrew or from the Sanskrit or from the Tamil or some of the even older language like Tamil or Pali or whatever it may be. So yeah, I definitely do think that we're in kind of a dumbing down. And going back to kind of your theories on God, I like to think about it as like and this is just a theory, that the grand programmer is an infinitely curious being, and that through his infinite curiosity, he kind of created this place as a way to explore every layer of himself, good and bad. So it's like the devil himself is maybe even an extension of God, playing out his role to then further challenge God to learn more about itself. Or, you know what I mean? So he's like creating these like challenges for himself to even overcome in order to better understand through being this kind of infinitely curious being.
I've thought about that myself, and it makes sense when people, or when it's said that man or man is the image of God, and I've meditated on that. I'm like, I imagine, like, wouldn't God be infinitely like divine and perfect? Like maybe the Creator is going through his own problems, spiritual problems too, and we're just a little microcosm.
Mm-hmm.
No, if that's the right word.
Yeah.
Of that. Yeah, like we're just little miniature versions of God, not having all of its powers, like within this like game theory system. Yeah, that's an interesting idea too. Maybe God's, I don't mean to be disrespectful, maybe he's got some problems he needs to work out.
Maybe we're working out those problems just by through existing. And
yeah. Woo! All right, I think I might be out of energy here.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that we
Awesome.
need to talk about, or?
No, I mean, we covered all the topics without even trying to. And yeah, I mean, I'm really grateful for you joining me and diving into these obscure places of thought, I guess, exploring these different ideas and theories. And yeah, so thanks
Yeah,
for coming on here.
it's good to. Oh, I cut you off. Sorry.
No, you're
No,
good.
this was great. I'm just glad, like, we got to just, and this is what I've always wanted to do, is just have a long conversation with you about these ideas. So it was just great to do it. And then this format allows us to ramble as like a socially acceptable thing. I'm okay with that personally. Like, I don't mind when that at all.
Yeah.
But so it's kind of like, yeah, is interesting. It's a conversation, and another level, it's like a podcast too.
Yeah.
So it was an exploration, like a journey. So I hope it came out well. I hope you're happy with it. Like I had a blast doing this. It's fun.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks for joining me, and we'll probably have to do another one at some point too. So.
Oh yeah, this will be like the Alex Jones, Joe Rogan. It's just fun. It's just fun, like talking about this stuff too. Like, and I feel I need to get that out of my system too. It's like, all right, I talked about everything I want to talk about.
Yeah.
With somebody else. I'm like, I feel at peace. So yeah, no, absolutely, this was fun, and I would love to do it again too. So
Cool.